We got 7 different stories from 7 different news outlets, guys. It's time for another episode of the Newsround. Let's go. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. This is REGANELITE here with another episode of the Newsround in the UK. Some of the stories that have been going on in the United Kingdom, and we start with an article from The Guardian here that more than 2 billion of UK foreign climate aid channelled through consultants since 2010. The findings raised concerns among experts who say climate funding works best when invested directly in local communities. So the gist of the story, and we'll read into it, is that rather than money that we are using to help foreign aid around the world, in particular when it comes to the climate situation, is not going directly into local communities, and it's going through consultants, and those consultants are taking up abundance of that money, which is cause for concern. Why is that happening? Let's see if we can find out a bit more about this, guys. So more than 2 billion worth of UK foreign aid aimed at helping poorer countries cope with the escalating climate crisis has been channeled through private consultants since 2010, according to analysis. The investigation by Carbon Brief found more than 10% of UK foreign aid spent on climate-related projects has gone through consultants like KPMG, PricewaterhouseCoopers, PwC, and Adam Smith International. The findings have raised concerns among those on the front line of the climate crisis who say climate funding works best when it is invested directly in local communities rather than through international corporations. Saheem Hugh, director of the International Centre for Climate Change and Development in Bangladesh, said, "There is a long history of sending international consultants to developing countries to assist in tackling climate change, which has not resulted in any real benefits after the international consultants leave the country." If it doesn't make any real benefit, then what is the benefit? What is the point of the consultant if the consultant isn't even going to make the difference? Why are we paying them if that is true to be the case? The analysis found that at least £2.11 billion has been handed to dozens of management consultants such as the KPMG, PwC and Adam Smith institutions since 2010. So this has been happening pretty much since the takeover of the Conservative government. Well, the Conservatives and Liberal Democrats when they started off together as a joint government. But was this already being lined up as Labour were heading out? I think it's a question as well. I don't know. They provided guidance on everything from hydropower dam construction in Nepal to farm diversification in Ethiopia. Alongside private consultants, the UK's climate finance is also spent via large international bodies such as World Bank, UN agencies, development banks and NGOs. Obviously there has to be some money to go, can't always go directly into communities. There are other factors, but it's just how much are we spending on consultants, I think needs to be put into question. Much of the money administered by these groups goes directly to projects, although all of them do take cuts along the way to pay for staff and other expenses. Yeah, as I said, that is to be expected. Nevertheless, experts says the large-scale involvement of private consultants can lead to the money being used less effectively, adding there is a growing opposition to climate aid being funneled through these companies rather than groups with local contracts and expenditures. Claire Shatter, a climate finance expert at the International Institute of Environment Development, said the least developed countries and small island states in particular have pushed for funding for more long-term climate action rather than project-based activity consultants often supported. She said the poorest and most climate-impacted countries are clear that business as usual in the climate finance is not working for them. Short-term projects driven by external experts are failing to provide the support they need to transform the low-carbon development and greater climate resilience. The UK government has scaled up its spending on consultants and made it easier for public sector bodies to hire them in recent years. Why? At the same time, their role in public life has been under growing scrutiny. Academics, politicians, and officials have criticised the outsourcing of responsibility to expensive private contractors. I can understand if there's less from politicians, but we shouldn't be throwing this all in the hands of private contractors to deal with this. There needs to be some kind of state watch over. I wouldn't say I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong on a politician, but there needs to be someone from the state or an official or somebody to ensure that they're doing their job if it is still going to go through private contractors. Responding to these concerns during a speech at the Labour Party conference this week, Rachel Rees, the Shadow Chancellor, vowed to slash consultancy spending by half at her party if her party won the next election. Okay. Carbon Brief Analysis looked at more than 25,000 transactions listed on the government's development tracker website from projects that contribute to the UK's international climate finances. Both the KPMG and PwC declined to comment on the Carbon Brief findings or the criticism of consultants during the climate finance project. They also declined to share information on how much money they retain as fees for their service on these projects. The UK government declined to comment on the use of consultants to administrate climate finance projects. A spokesperson for the Adam Smith International said it did not recognise the figures of the Carbon Brief analysis. They added the consultancy articulately ensures optimal value for money in its projects, with comprehensive and responsible structured fees and transparency in its financial designs, including profitability and expenditure. They also said the organisation places a paramount emphasis on both levelling and strengthening local capacities of all our projects, with the majority of ASI funds being used to engage in national consultants and partnerships with local groups. So the ASI are saying that they're doing their job basically, but it is a cause for concern, and it should be one that we should be worried about. If we want to make sure that if we are spending money across to foreign aid, we want to make sure that it goes into their hands. Now there are some factors obviously where some of the money does unfortunately get lost, and when it does, it's impossible to track. We know that happens, but there needs to be insurance. There needs to be some kind of insurance to make sure that the vast majority, at least, are going to where we want it to go. Some kind of insurance, some kind of backstop, something. And there should be a cause for concern if it's all in the hands of private contractors. I don't care how good their reputation is. There needs to be someone official. If it is a politician, it should be a politician, but someone official from the government that is making sure that this is being done properly. Of government advisors or somebody, and not just put into the hands of private consultants or whatever, and then they're told to make it happen. So there needs to be some kind of state overwatch site on when it comes to this kind of stuff, and I'm sure you guys will agree with me on that. Right, next one we're going to is going from Sky News, guys. This one has been covered a few times, but I haven't really commented on it, but we'll read on it and then I'll give my thoughts. So it's the headline that the SNP MP Lisa Cameron defects to the Conservatives over bullying in Westminster group. The MP for East Kilburn, Stratton and Liverpool, who was elected in 2015, criticised her treatment by the SNP and its leadership after she spoke out about her colleague Patrick Grady. Now, this could possibly change by the time you've watched this, potentially, but I'm just going to state for the record, I don't really know a lot about Scottish politics, but I just think this is quite a huge thing to take, quite a huge defect to the Conservatives, that is for sure. So an MP has defected to the SNP to join the Conservatives amid accusations of toxic and bullying treatment from Westminster colleagues. Dr Lisa Cameron, an MP for East Kilbride since 2015, criticised her treatment by the SNP and its leadership after she spoke out about her colleague Patrick Grady. Mr Grady was suspended from the House of Commons for 2 days last year after he was found to have made an unwanted sexual advance to a member of the party since in 2016. Dr Cameron says she was mistreated by her party after speaking in support of the complainant. The MP says she received support from the Prime Minister Rishi Sunak in recent weeks after opening up about the deterioration of her mental health that led to her being put on antidepressants. However, she claimed that she had received no contact from the SNP leadership. In response, the SNP said consultants will be appalled at the move and are calling for her to step down. First Minister Yassam Yousaf also criticised the clinical psychiatric decision but admitted he was not surprised. He said, "It's not the least surprising news that I've had a letter of the SNP, I must confess. Lisa Cameron should do the honourable thing. She should resign her seat. She should do the honourable thing by her constituents who voted for an SNP MP but did not vote for a Conservative MP." Mr Yosef added to see someone who claims to have supported Scottish independence cross the floor to the Conservatives and Unionist Party betrays the fact that she probably never believed in the cause in the first place. See, this is the key. That's the thing that's kind of thrown me off here a little bit. Like, you can't be a part of the Scottish National Party and not be for independence. I can understand, like, every political party, there's always squabbles, there's always going to be infightings, there's always going to be differences on policies, but this one on independence should be one that the party is united on, without a shadow, should be always united on. I mean, what if it was Labour that she defected to? What would be would this be the same impact? I'm not sure. But to jump to the Conservatives when she knows she's not going to be able to hold on to that seat at the general election. There's no way she's going to hold on to that seat. I mean, I'll be shocked if she does. It is a straight up fight between the SNP and Labour, the seat that she's holding. And why did she go to the Conservatives? Apparently, as well, I don't know if it's in this article, but I've seen from other one or two other videos and articles that I've heard when I heard about this story, is that Rishi Sunak played quite a hand in her decision to defect as well, which means that the Prime Minister probably may have offered her something. And my feeling is that what could he have offered her? Because what are the Conservatives getting in return out of this? This is the thing. What are they benefiting from having her defect from SNP to the Conservatives? That's what I'm curious to see. And is this really going to entice people to vote Conservative in Scotland? I don't think it really will. I just don't understand the benefit of going to Conservative. Like, if you really were upset, you would have gone independent instead, would you not? Excuse me. It just doesn't feel right to me. In a statement, Ms. Dr. Cameron said, "I do not feel able to continue in what I've experienced as a toxic and bullying SNP Westminster group, which resulted in my requiring counsel for a period of 12 months in the Parliament that caused significant deterioration for my health and well-being as addressed in my GP, including the need for antidepressants. I will never regret my actions in standing up for a victim of abuse at the hands of the SNP MP last year, but I have no faith in remaining in the parties whose leadership supported this perpetrator's interest over that of any of the victims who have shown little to no interest in acknowledging or addressing the impact." It is important to take that into account, but we do have to take what she like. At the end of the day, we don't know the absolute truth of what's going on inside the SNP. I have to make that very clear. Now, some people might say in the chat that what she's saying is not true and she's making it all up. Well, you'd be a hypocrite for saying that when Meghan Markle talks about opening up about the bullying and the harassment she gets from the British tabloids all the time. It's the same thing. So I would say to exercise caution when talking about this. I think it's if what she's saying is true, then she needs to be well looked after, and she needs to be consulted on. But like I say, Scottish politics is not something that I'm an expert in any way, shape or form on. If you want a better analysis, I would recommend checking out Indie Truck Davies channel or with the Two Davies on YouTube. Check them out, or check out the Scottish Independent group. They will no doubt have much more detailed videos when it comes to this. They will have a much better analysis of this and will know a lot better of the history of Dr. Cameron rather than I will. But I'm more just about the actual defection is still quite a shock here to me. Goes on to say, "I'm particularly grateful to the Prime Minister in valuing my continued contribution to Parliament as a health professional and in talking time to listen. It is the first time I have felt heard and showed positive, including leadership in contrast which I have encountered in the SNP at Westminster over many years." Dr Cameron's defection comes on the day she was facing a selection battle in her constituency. The SNP hit out at Dr Cameron, who are calling for her to quit to allow for a by-election. I think also she was on the verge of being deselected as well. My understanding as well. Spokesperson for the party said the people of East Kilbride, Stretton and Loughborough will be appalled that they are now represented by a Conservative and Unionist MP. Lisa Cameron should do the right thing and step down and allow a by-election. She should run a by-election. If she's confident that she can hold on to her seat, she should run a by-election. Why then sitting there as a Conservative MP is not what the Scottish people vote. The Scottish people in that constituency voted for. That is a very good argument from SNP in that regard. Her constituents elected an SNP MP, not a Tory, and they deserve to have a democratic opportunity to elect a hard-working SNP MP who will put in the interests of Scotland first. On a personal basis, we wish her well. Dr Cameron also hit out a division caused by the Scottish independent debate. The SNP are due to hold a party conference in Aberdeen between 15th and 17th of October, where the topic of independence will be discussed. The MPs said they will instead focus on politics that benefit the four nations of the UK. She said families like mine experience significant division regarding the issue of independence. It has taken its toll, and I've come to the conclusion that it's more helpful to focus my energies upon constructive politics that benefit everyone across the four nations of the UK, and to move towards healing those divisions for the collective good. Being in the SNP has been bad for my health. I will be taking time as advised to recuperate, and will continue as always to focus upon serving my constituents. The MP added she was looking forward to supporting the Prime Minister. Rishi Sunak said he was delighted. Mr Cameron had decided to join the Conservatives. She said he's very brave and committed, and a committed consultancy MP. Lisa is right that we should aim to do politics better, with more emphasis and less division, and a dedication to always doing what he thinks is right. Says the one who scrapped HS2, among other things. I look forward to working with her on the disabilities issue she has championed so passionately in Parliament, and on the issues that really matter to her constituents in East Kilbride, Strathern and Loughborough. Her decision is a sign that we are the party for those who make the constructive long-term decisions for a brighter future for the whole of the UK. Don't think that conference really emphasised that, if I'm honest. Scottish Tory leader Douglas Ross was also looking forward to working with Dr Cameron. He added, like many ex-SNP supporters, she has realised her party is hopelessly divided under Hama Yoslif and incapable of focusing on the real priorities of the Scottish people. Lisa took a principled stand supporting the victims of Patrick Grady when her party took the side of the disgraced MP. For doing so, she has been shamefully and explicitly mistreated by the SNP. I'm not going to comment on the Patrick Grady case because I don't know too much about it. Labour MP Rosie Duffel showed her support for David Cameron, posting on X, formerly known on Twitter. She said, "Much love to my friend Dr Cameron, who has had a really tough time." Scottish Labour leader Andreas Sowa, who is running high after her party's recent by-election win, said changes needed across the whole country. She posted on X. She said, "In 2019, they said vote SNP to get rid of the Tories. Now that Labour is set to get rid of the Tories, they join them. It's why we need a change in Scotland and across the UK." Ian Murray, Labour Shadow Scottish Secretary, said the consultants have been let down by the SNP's MP who have shown their true colours. He added, "On Monday, while the new MP Michael Shanks will be taking an oath on behalf of constituents, Lisa Cameron will be crossing the floor to join the Tories. It's clearer than ever, vote SNP, get Tory, or vote Labour and get the change our country deserves." As I said, guys, obviously I'm not too much on Scottish politics, but it's more about the defection I'm more kind of stunned by more than anything, and I don't. She's coming across like they're going to really help her, and they're going to make a difference to her personally, and I just don't see that. I just want to know what is she getting out of this? That's the thing that doesn't really make sense to me. Why is she doing this? What is the benefit of her defecting to Conservatives? I just don't get that, guys, and I think that's the kind of thing that I'm more questioned over. But obviously we've got the Scottish National Party conference coming up. I won't be directly covering it, but I'll certainly be keeping an eye out. And as I said, guys, definitely check out Scottish Independence channel, the Two Davies, Indie Truck Davy. They will definitely have some real insights into what's going on in Scotland. If you want all your news regarding Scotland and Scottish independence, all that jazz, guys. I'll put links to their channels, so definitely worth checking out for sure. So we're going to move on from Scottish politics, go back to English politics per se, shall we say. This one is from iNews, guys. The Labour's maths plan should include money lessons in senior schools, Martinlewis warned. The founder of money saving expert says numeracy isn't enough. So what's this all about, guys? So experts have welcomed Labour's plans to roll out the real-world maths lessons in primary schools, but insisted it must include full financial education rather than just superficial attempts to make the subject relevant. Bridget Phillipson, the Shadow Education Secretary, unveiled Labour's plans to bring maths to life in her keynote speech at the party's annual conference on Wednesday. Primary school children will be taught to manage their household budgets, exchange currency and rank their favourite football teams under the plans as part of Labour's efforts to make maths relevant if it wins the next general election. Make maths relevant? Wouldn't the word be make maths more fun? Because that's isn't when you tie, like I learned when I was a kid, if you can tie fun into education, you will encourage the kids to learn better. I guess ranking their football teams is one way of doing it, especially if you do it with sports, if they like a certain sport. But yeah, you want to try and tie maths into something fun for them, because if you can do that, it can definitely educate them a lot easier, I would say, in my opinion anyway. But hopefully it's not the same kind of maths lessons that Rishi Sunak are talking about, to be fair. But maths is important, that is for sure. Mrs Phillipson pinched it as the Labour alternative to the Prime Minister's flagship maths to 18 policy. Yeah, the maths to 18 policy it's not necessary and it's not needed, guys, if I'm all honest. It really is not. Yeah. Do we need to be teaching maths to kids up to the age of 18? No, not in my opinion. Which is focused on the sixth form pupils that require all students to take maths until they leave school. Labour's plan will see primary schools given maths lessons on things such as household budgeting, currency exchange rates when going on holiday, sports league tables and cookie represents. Household budgeting is good. I do agree with that one. It will also bring elements of financial literacy into maths lessons, such as using bank accounts and individual savings accounts to teach children about percentages. Not sure how they're gonna. I do like some of this. It sounds good, but is it gonna stick with children? Is the other question. But experts warned that the plans were not enough without comprehensive financial literature lessons for older children, which said will require significant boosts to the workforce. Martin Lewis, the founder of Money Saving Expert, said that while he was pleased about Labour's proposal to put more financial numeracy into primary schools, we must also properly fulfil the resourcing of financial education in senior schools. Mr Lewis has long campaigned for financial education to be fully integrated into the curriculum and has produced his own textbooks on the subject focused on teaching children about savings, borrowing, tax, pension and fraud. Numeracy isn't enough. We need full financial education. It needs to be properly resourced with school materials and ongoing teacher training, he said. This is key. Excuse me. This is a key thing. If you can teach children how to manage numbers, learn about like that kind of financial kind of thing, we could really create some really smart kids here for the future in the United Kingdom. And I'm not talking about the ones here that come out of Eton. I mean, I'm talking about some really smart kids that can really use numbers to their advantage in life, and could also be a great benefit to the UK. I think it can be a really great policy if done right. David Thomas, the Chief Executive of the Mathematics Education of Social Mobility and Excellence, the MESME charity, and a former political advisor for the Department of Education, added that the real-world element of Labour's maths plan must be well-targeted and not superficial. Yes, I agree with that. We absolutely have a problem with maths and a culture where people are proud to be bad at it. Any commitment to reserve this is much needed and welcome, he told the Eye. The caution that I would give is not falling into the trap of superficial relevance. When you speak to children about their experience in maths, a lot of people will end up saying, when am I going to use this? Yeah, that's the common theme when it comes to maths. I mean, nowadays, when you just simply use a calculator on your phone, don't you? When it comes to these newer stuffs, but you want to make, but like I said, you want to make it enticing, you want to make it fun, and you want to encourage it, and you want to put it in a positive light for kids, not just teaching them. But that starts with them having an experience in secondary school that is not intellectually challenging, where actually teachers try to make things relevant or engaging in a way that the children perceive as slightly patronising, because it is what they want is to be pushed. Lead Elliott Major, social mobility professor at the University of Exeter, added that while financial literacy was welcome, a large proportion of children are still leaving school without basic maths. Around a third of students fail to achieve a standard pass or grade 4 in their maths GCSE each year, with the figure jumping to almost 40% this summer. Children are required to retake maths and English GCSEs until they pass, but most fail again and again. Yeah, for me, I never passed my maths and English. I never took them because I could not actually get to the requirements in my last school to actually be on those levels. I did get something for them, but I never actually passed maths or English GCSEs, believe it or not. Professor Major told the Eye, "What we urgently need is to support basic numeracy early in children's lives so that every child has a functioning skill by age 16. Our research shows that half of teenagers who failed to get a grade 4 in maths were already judged by teachers to be behind at age 5. Those who failed to get grade 4s are twice as likely to end up not in education, employment or training, but is twice as likely to be cautioned by police. If you fail to get basic grades at 16, it damages your life prospects in many ways." Well, some people have dropped out in school and done pretty well for themselves, so I wouldn't paint that as the end of the world yet for kids. I really wouldn't. I think that's a tad bit harsh, if I'm honest. Labour has insisted that its early intervention model is an improvement on Rishi Sunak's plans to make children study maths to 18 by adding on an extra 2 years of compulsory teaching. Ms Phillipson says Labour's rival scheme would tackle our chronic cultural problem with maths by making sure it is better taught at 6, never mind 16. Mr Sunak said he will look at a new offer for Key Stage 3 as part of the government's plan to replace A-levels with brand new qualifications, but is yet to provide further details. It's all hot air from the Conservatives now. The Prime Minister announced last week that his Maths to 18 plan will form one part of a much more ambitious blueprint for overhauling England's education system with an introduction of the Advanced British Standard. I'm not in favour of this at all. I just don't trust. I don't trust him to deliver a decent education for our children, if I'm honest, guys, in Rishi Sunak. But as for this idea from Labour, I think it's a good one. But it'll require a lot of input, and I hope they do bring on board Martinlewis a little bit to get some insight from him as well, get some more expert analysis from him as well. But we'll have to wait and see how that one develops anyway. But obviously, of course, once they get into power, then they can start introducing these things. But yeah, education does need an overhaul, but obviously there's also the issue of pay when it comes to teachers, which also needs to be addressed as well. Guys, we're coming up to near the half-hour mark. If you can, hit the like button, we would greatly appreciate it. If you can, share across social media platforms. And if you're not subscribed or well, please hit the bell notification icon so when you'll be notified of when I go live, whenever I upload a video for you guys. The next one here is from the BBC, guys. This one is also regarding Labour policy as such here. It's from Keir Starmer here with the headline that "I won't build homes without GPs and schools," he has stated here. It's a bit of a short one, but I still think it's one just to highlight importance in with regards to the announcement from Keir Starmer that he's planning to build 1.5 million homes within 5 years, which is a very high ambitious target, but I still think it's a target that can be achieved, despite some people saying that it's not possible. I do think it can be done with the right people and the right planning. You can make it happen. So the Labour leader Keir Starmer said he would not be allowing housing development to be built without proper infrastructure such as GPs and schools. He likened the current situation to the Wild West, where developers decide where things are going to go and the infrastructure never catches up. Earlier this week, Sir Keir said he would bulldoze through plans in order to build 1.5 million homes. The Conservatives said Labour's record on house building has been atrocious. The last 13 years on house building has been atrocious as well, and there's only been one party in charge yet during that whole period. Just putting that on the record. Housing Minister Rachel Maclean said Labour had failed to build enough homes in places where they are in power, such as London and Wales. She also accused the party of blocking house building by voting against relaxing water pollution rules. On Tuesday, Sir Keir used his speech in Labour's annual conference to promise to build next generation of new towns in English cities. He said he wanted to speed up on the unused urban lands such as disused car parks and drenched wastelands. However, in a series of interviews with BBC local radio stations, he was pressed on concerns about accelerating house building. Speaking on BBC Radio 3 Counties Radio, Sir Keir said he acknowledged people's worries, adding, "What they are saying to us at first, they don't know about development and when the diggers turn up. There's no prior opportunity for their voice to be heard. And secondly, you're promised a station and your GP surgery to go with the new homes, and none of that turns up. These are concerns that we need to address. What you will not get from me is a building of houses but not the infrastructure." BBC Radio Devon asked the Labour leader about the issues of second homes pushing up prices in the country. In addition to promising to build more houses, Sir Keir reiterated his party's pledge to introduce a licensing scheme in England for people renting out their properties for short-term holiday stays. He argued that it would help ensure that the system was properly controlled. A licensing scheme has already been set up in Scotland, while the Welsh Government is planning to introduce a similar scheme. The UK Government has carried out a consultation on setting up a registration scheme for short-term lets in England, but Sir Keir said, "I get frustrated with consultations. I will move straight on to the do something about it stage." Labour's plans to build 1.5 million homes in England in 5 years is broadly similar to the government's aim of delivering 300,000 new units a year from the mid-2020s. Asked on Wednesday about his proposals differed from the Conservatives, he said his commitment had been robustly tested, adding that he would only put bomb-proof proposals before voters at election. Labour have not said how many new towns would be built, saying it would run a 6-month consultation inviting bids from councils. Okay, so he has said that you can't build homes without infrastructure, but he hasn't really said here about. He's mentioned GPs, but he didn't mention schools here. Like the headline says GPs and schools, he hasn't said that in this, so they haven't highlighted this in the article. Either that or he didn't say that, but he has pointed out infrastructure there, which is right. There's no point building 1.5 million homes if you're not going to build the infrastructure around it. That is absolutely important. So if you're not going to build, you've got to build the infrastructure around such homes, shops, and all the usual standard stuff, schools, GPs, all the necessary things that you need. But all this, as you know, requires money. It can't all obviously come from the taxpayers' purse. It has to come from. We have to encourage investment from private contractors, private companies as well, in order for this to help work. But I would hope that this target can be achieved. But I also believe that that in all seriousness, I do think Labour are serious about the rest of the infrastructure. I know people will say, "Where's the details? Where's the details?" I get it. I know they haven't given the details. But they said there at the end of the report they have to do quite a bit of consultation, and rightly so. You need to do some consultation if you're going to build this many homes in this short amount of time. And I'm sure they're going to be consulting with lots of experts and whatnot before they start on a project such as this as well. That is for sure. So the next one, guys, is from the Independent. This is quite a worrying one here for the Conservative Party. So Rishi Sunak's popularity hits a record low after the Tory party conference. Just 1 in 5 voters believe Mr. Sunak would make the best Prime Minister, down from a quarter before the Tory conference. Not good, guys, not good. Rishi Sunak's popularity has crashed to a record low since the Conservative Party conference, a damning new poll showed. This poll literally just dropped Friday morning as well, just in case anybody's wanted to know. Just 1 in 5 voters now believe Mr. Sunak would make the best Prime Minister, down from a quarter before the Tory get-together, according to a new YouGov poll. And in a blow to the Tories' electoral hopes, it means that the figure has reached the lowest point since Mr. Sunak entered Downing Street last year. to Keir Starmer's popularity has also fallen, with 32% of the public saying that he would make the best Prime Minister compared to 34% earlier this month. The survey conducted by The Times shows a significant uptick in the number of not sure voters, with 43% of the population undecided between the two party leaders. I think it also could be the case, guys, is that I've heard a lot of people basically saying, especially some Tory voters, who are basically planning on not even voting or not even going to the polls at the general election. So we could see at this general election, a potential drop in voter numbers, not just based on the voter ID, but from their distaste of how the Conservative Party have managed themselves. Because some people will be flat out refusing to vote Labour in any way, shape or form. Some might vote, we'll see some of them vote for reform, I'm sure, if they get the opportunity to vote for reform. But there are those out there who will just flat out will not vote for Keir Starmer or Labour because they simply don't trust them, despite the fact that they haven't been in power for 13 years. Despite Sir Keir's personal support slipping, the poll conducted after the Labour leader's own conference speech, which was stormed by a protester who showered him in glitter, showed a rise in support for the party. I saw some of the merchandise from that they had. They missed out an opportunity there they could have had like glitter Starmer or something on the face or something, like there was lots of they could have taken advantage of it from a money perspective, but that guy he has apologised since. It has come on the record that he has apologised to Kier, apparently. I have seen reports that he has apologised. I don't know if he's apologised to him personally directly or if it's just online, but he has said he's apologised for it. But it was a stupid act nonetheless. It showed 28% of voters thought Sir Keir had a clear plan for the country, up 6 points in a week. Just 19% believe Mr Sunak did, down by 2 points in the same period. Still, only 28% of voters thought Sir Keir had a clear plan. Not every that for me is a cause for concern. See, and the thing is that there was a lot of rhetoric at the Labour Party conference, but there were policies, but it wasn't clear cut. Like, we still don't have like a clear manifesto of what Labour are planning to do, and they're waiting for when the government makes the move on the next general election. Most people are predicting it's going to be in autumn. Some people even think it won't be until late 2025 before Rishi Sunak calls a general election. Either way, it's just we're going to be sitting and waiting for a while still. Meanwhile, 47% of those polled said Labour would make a significant change in government, almost double the number who said the same about Mr Sunak. This month in Manchester, Mr Sunak told the Conservative faithful, "It is time for a change and we are at it." He has now scrapped himself a handful of his own party's own politics, including controversial northern leg of HS2. He insisted when it came to scrapping HS2, the facts have changed and the costs have doubled, meaning that he had to act. Labour's national campaign coordinator Pat McFerrin said the Tories have let Britain down for too long and they cannot be the change for their own failures. YouGov's latest poll showed the Tories' attempts at becoming the party of change have yet to convince the electorate, and it's come after months of polls showing the Conservatives significantly behind Labour, with current gap at 17 points. In his very own big address, Sir Keir made a direct appeal to Conservatives to voters to join Labour, as he promised to lead a mission government in national interest and end the chaos of the Tory era. The Labour leader rolled up his sleeves for a crucial conference speech, pledging to repair a crumbling Britain, with a host of new towns and new approaches to economic growth led by a renewal party. The polls are still showing strongly in favour of Labour, but as we know, guys, when it comes to when the general election is announced, and as we get closer to that election, we know that what normally tends to happen is that the polls start getting tighter. People who are significantly in favour of Labour, some may start turning back to the Conservatives. The Conservatives may come out with policies and appeals with more interesting. Some people have said that this is going to be based on a cultural war. I certainly hope it doesn't come to that. But that seems to be the rhetoric that they're going down. I noticed also at the Labour conference, just going off topic a little bit there, is that they did have lots of discussions. They had the likes of GB News and that. So right wing sort of media outlets to be talking to. So there will be people out there, those who are unsure about Labour. They will be hearing from Labour a lot more. But we'll have to keep an eye on it and see how things progress as they go along. Obviously, I will continue to cover things regarding the Labour Party. If you want to see some of my thoughts and details of stuff on videos that I've covered over the last 6 to 8 months on Labour, I have a playlist on the Labour Party, Labour News, for stories and that regarding them. So if you want to hear different stories where my opinions have changed here and there, you can check that out. So next one, guys, is with regards to the UK Covid-19 inquiry. This is from Open Democracy. It's I think it's only a few days old. It's not too bad, but I thought the Covid-19 inquiry is of great significance, guys, and we do need to highlight this one. So government's pandemic modulars weren't giving key policy information. Graham Medley, who also tells the UK Covid-19 inquiry that risks of the NHS being overwhelmed, were first raised in February 2020. That statement itself does not surprise me one bit. We were already worried when it hit Italy. I was greatly concerned. I'm sure many of you in the UK were greatly concerned too when it hit Italy. I remember the first story when it actually hit the UK, and I was like, oh shoot, it's actually here. And then the panic started coming around, didn't it, before we were finally locked down. So the UK government has withheld key information on health policy from the scientists tasked with modelling the pandemic during 2020, the Covid-19 inquiry was told today. Giving evidence to the second module of the inquiry, Graham Medley, a professor of the infectious disease modelling at the London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine, claimed the government had failed to share details of its own policies for managing the pandemic or to tell scientists what it considered a successful or less worse outcome in his written evidence to the inquiry. He said this prevented the group from helping the government as much as it could. During the pandemic, Medley was chair of the subgroup of the government's Scientific Advisory Group for Emergencies, SAGE, that advised the government on Covid-19 based on infectious disease modelling and epidemiology. The subgroup, also known as the SPIMO, that's the Scientific Pandemic Influenza Group on Modelling Operational Subgroup. Modelling has a particular problem with the lack of discussion and a lack of understanding of what the policies might be, because we cannot make a policy neutral module, he said. If we don't know what the government might do when or why they might do it, then we have to second guess. We have to make it up. We can't put nothing into the module. The government needs to be... I mean, I understand that the government cannot always know what's right, but if they can't... But they need to be clear. But they need to try and be as clear as they can, especially to the experts, so the experts can give them the best case scenarios. Okay, if you do this, this is what we think is going to happen. This is what we think will happen. If you do this, this is what we think will happen. So I do think in that part they do need to be honest on those kind of things. On the hoof strategy. Oh God. Merdy said the UK's pre-pandemic strategies for dealing with epidemics was to have the epidemic on one wave. There were no other strategies that changed as soon as the epidemic developed, and the strategies were much more short-term, he said. In his written statement to the inquiry, he added that between February and March 2020 there was a sense that government strategy was being created on the hoof. It wasn't clear what the plan was going to be, he said when questioned about the description. Finally, in January 2021, the Cabinet Office started sending people to the SPIMO meetings the inquiry heard, enabling the group to better understand the government policy concerns at the time. It wasn't until early 2021 that there was good dialogue between policymakers and the scientists, said witness and epidemiologist Matt Keeling at the SAGE member and professor speaking later in the afternoon session. He said it was really the first time there was a marriage between science and policy, and we can generate policy-ready answers on a timescale that was important. The group gathered that a successful outcome would be the avoidance of a major surge in COVID infections in the following 6 months, says Merdy. This resulted in a shift in the government's approach to managing the pandemic and to follow data, not dates. Excuse me. But why did it take till early 2021 In which case we can say, do it slowly, don't rush to open up immediately, he explained. Removing restrictions slowly and remove them is an order way so that the data analysis and the modelling could inform you what the impact of the previous decision was. The NHS overwhelmed. Merely written statement to the inquiry said it had become increasingly clear to the SPIMO during February 2020 that the NHS capacity would be overwhelmed by COVID. Asked by Inquiry Counsel Andrew O'Connor, KC, to confirm this, he said, by the end of February it was clear that the NHS would be overwhelmed, and I don't think it was being kept secret. He said that in February 2020 the subgroup had established the proportion of people who would die from infections. To model hospitalisation rates, a meeting with the NHS and clinical colleagues was needed. A need for such working group was raised and a record in the SAGE meeting on the 27th of February 2020. Merdy said the group was clear to this point that the NHS would be overwhelmed, but needed clinical input to understand the extent to which it would be overwhelmed. He was pushed by O'Connor on whether SAGE and SPIMO should have raised the alarm in February 2020. If you and your colleagues had already realised during February that the NHS was going to be overwhelmed by the pandemic and was developing, why didn't you say so? Asked O'Connor. He's referring to the minutes of the 25th of February 2020 SAGE meeting. Record simply that there needs to be some reasonable worst case planning for the NHS. Merdy said that the writers of these minutes needed to be questioned on this. Yeah. Why? I literally just pointed it out, didn't I? When they said, like, when they knew that the NHS was going to be overwhelmed, and I think it was even the media was kind of saying that as well. That the media was I think even the media was saying that why, like, the NHS is going to be overwhelmed, that they won't be able to cope with it. So I think that was a worry too. I think the most frightening thing so far out there's so many concerns and worries about how it was managed, but I just think the lack of action from the government, from what we've read so far into the COVID inquiries, is just quite extraordinary. It's extraordinary how little to no care that there has been from them. I mean, it really, really is quite damning, to say the least, guys. I just baffles my absolute mind. Like, people died. People didn't get to say goodbye to their loved ones. I mean, yes, we know about Partygate, obviously, and rightfully so, and that was infuriating, but right at the very start of this, there was not a seriousness about this from this government, and it's crazy. It's just absolutely crazy. And it took, like, they didn't realise until it really started hitting that they were like, oh, we need to do something. To me, it comes across as laziness from this government. It gives me the impression that they were lazy, that they just didn't care until they really had to care. Like, when it affects them, when it was really getting shouted about, that was when they started to care. But, well, I say don't start to care, had to do something, shall we say. But my general belief is, regardless of the outcome of this inquiry, is that lives could have been saved if the government had acted sooner. That's my general 2 cents. But obviously, the COVID inquiry has more to unveil, that is for sure. Yeah, it's not good. So, guys, we have one more story for you. Don't know if it's going to get us right to the end, but we'll see. So obviously there's been a lot of talk about the prison systems lately, guys, in the UK. We've had covered quite a few stories with regards to it. They really are getting overwhelmed, and we're going to be reading a bit more of a reportage one here, and this is from Byline Times. From prisoner to publisher, reformed robber unmasks Britain's broken prison system. Stephen Jackley, a former prisoner turned author and campaigner, pulls back the curtain on the UK's prison system in an exclusive interview with Byline Times as he launches his new book, Just Time. I will try to put a link here for his book, Just Time, in the description. Don't know if he have an audio, but if he has an audio, probably worth checking that out as well, guys. So the former prisoner Stephen Jackley, who served 6.5 years and 14 incarceration facilities there. So this is an interview exclusively with Byline Times on this, guys. So in 2008, Stephen Jackley, then a 21-year-old university student who was sentenced to 13 years for armed robbery and burglary in the US, he was extradited to the UK, where he served 6.5 years and saw the impact of austerity policies from behind bars. Dubbed by part of the press a Robin Hood figure after planning to give some of the stolen cash to charity, he was classified by the prison service as a high escape risk inmate. Jackley was frequently moved around prisons, serving in 14 in total, nearly all in the UK. While serving his sentence, the softly spoke Brit was diagnosed with Asperger's syndrome, which took the government to court several times by representing himself, and completed an Open University degree. He lost a 2014 bid to secure inmates self-representing in court cases access to computers. In that time, he witnessed a seismic shift in a system that locks up 85,000 people in England and Wales. In his eyes, a bag of chaos that is bursting at the seams. From the twilight years of Gordon Brown's Labour government to the draconian book ban and the end of prisoners' legal aid ushered in by Conservative Justice Minister Chris Grayling, he witnessed how the government's handling of the prison pandered to an ever more partisan press. Upon release, he went on to set up a social enterprise and now charity, the publisher Arcbound. He received a recommendation from HRH Prince Charles, and now lives in Glasgow. We spoke to him on the release of his book Just Time. I'm starting to lose my voice a bit here, but we're coming near to the end, so it's not too bad, guys. So let's see some of the questions and answers that I put to him. So Josh Montalban was doing the interview. What were the biggest flaws of the prison system in your eyes? Why do you believe it's failing prisoners in the public? So he says one of the reasons is the power that individual politicians can have on influencing the system. And you have to bear in mind that they have no clue whatsoever. In some cases, they never even entered a prison. And that actually started a purely political thing to show that they are tough on criminals and so on. It often does not have any positive implications. I saw that strategy with Chris Grayling, who was Justice Secretary while I was inside. He introduced a number of policies that were just really bad. They didn't do anything whatsoever to help anyone, even people outside. Because if you treat someone badly in custody, they're just going to go out even worse when they come back in. Couldn't agree more with that statement, to be fair. Every prison system needs to have a structure of accountability, because if you have an environment where you give power to someone else who has power over others, so there's going to be abuse, and inevitably there's going to be no checks and boundaries. That's going to cause problems in terms of abuse in terms of all kinds of stuff. Miscarriages of justice. Once they took away legal aid, meant that prisoners couldn't access any accountability service unless they were wealthy, of course. Legal aid was reinstated for some prisoners in 2018 following legal challenges. And there was nothing else except in place for a complaint system that wasn't fit for purpose when I went into the book. Prisons and Probation's Ombudsman was also in a similar state, where they took over a year to investigate cases, by which time the case in question would no longer be relevant. And the prison's inspectorates can only conduct overall inspections. They can't look into individual cases, and they can only make recommendations. Prisons are part of the justice system, which means they need to be accountable, and there needs to be a way for people within them to access the courts as a means of a last resort. You were denied access to legal aid, or was it just an issue if it wasn't even on the cards? And he says, in response to it, yes, prisoner categorisation. There are cases where someone needs to go to a lower risk category in order to be released. So imagine if they refuse to review the categorisation. There's no way to challenge that for a solicitor after 2013. What do? They can't even be released. So it's impacting basic freedoms, basic fundamental rights. It's not just a case of, oh, this person wants to be treated better in prison. They need us to listen. It's about fundamental civil liberties and rights that everybody has whenever they are in prison or not in prison. And in my case, I was working outside on a temporary release. And then suddenly this policy came in and said, look, you can no longer do that because you're high risk. And there's no way for me to challenge that in courts. I had to self-represent. I've seen how the court systems work. It's very much not in favour of self-representation. It's certainly not in favour of people in custody. So he was doing some temporary release, and when the policy changed, he was ushered back in. That temporary release, where he could have, deemed himself a helpful member of public, and he was just pulled straight back in. I do have some thoughts about prisoners, but I'll save that to the end, if I can make it to the end with my voice. It must have been quite a bizarre process to be a prisoner or self-representing in a court at the same time. What were some of your takeaways from that, and how it worked and didn't work? His response is, the craziest thing I came across was this blanket ban that you can access a computer to type any legal stuff out, and on your legal documents go into like hundreds of pages. So I was having to write everything by hand. I couldn't access all the legal reference material. Books in the library were GCSE law books. And I was up against barristers who had computers and legal reference material, so it was completely inequality. So despite representing yourself, you didn't actually have access to these documents that are being used against you in court, citing a legal reference without having access to it at all. His response is, I could only frame my argument within logic, one of these basic law books in that liberal cited cases from 20 years ago. I was pulling out a few lines from that, and I did manage to succeed in getting permission for a judicial review. And I got to the final hearing, and it was actually, I was expecting to get a case through to the effect that, like in America, prisoners are entitled to law liberties. Effectively, self-representation to me is a common sense, but in the UK that isn't that right. So I tried to establish that, and I failed. But yes, it just goes to show how unequal the system would be. You served in 14 prison facilities. It must have been really disruptive to your efforts to rebuild your life after. His response was, each prison was like starting refresh all over again, dealing with the bullying, having to overcome it all over again. So yes, it wasn't easy. Why would you ship someone around to so many different prison facilities? 14. What's the reason behind shifting them constantly to different prison facilities? Like 14 different ones. That's cause for concern. I mean, I know our prison systems are overwhelmed, but what was the need for constantly pushing them from prison to prison? Chris Grayling will probably be remembered for not particularly fondly of the justice sector. Did his ban on books being brought into prisons in 2014 have an impact on you? His response was, I was there when that happened. So basically he was telling lies. In the media, he was saying they were simply wanting to avoid stuff being sent into prisons, like drugs and so on. But the books were already carefully scanned, x-rayed and so on. And he was saying that he was stopping food being sent in. That was never the case, and he must have known that. Ministers have immense power over people. The way this person could have gotten away with blatant lies and people believing in so many cases, it was absolute rubbish. You served in 14 facilities. That would have given you quite a unique insight into different prisons' provisions. What were some of the biggest differences you witnessed, and was overcrowding an issue? His response was yes. That became an issue later in my sentence, also because of Chris Grayling. He issued orders for single cells to be turned into triple cells. So you can imagine you have a single cell with one person suddenly having 3 people. In terms of variability, in one prison it was like living in a Victorian era. In some we had 23-hour lockdowns, and then in another prison there were showers on the cell, exercise yards, and it was open. In one, most of the prisoners were employed compared to where only 10% of the population had jobs. It was really variable. If you're going to so many different prisons and they're not even kind of like, I wouldn't say the exact same, but kind of have like a principled line of things, then that's not good either. Especially if you're getting shipped around a lot as well. All these different systems and that. I think they need to be more closely aligned. I don't know about across the whole of the UK, but maybe at least maybe across, like in England, they need to be all more in line with each other. Same as Scotland, the prison systems need to be more in line with each other. Same with Wales, Northern Ireland. that the prison system should be more aligned to what they all do and how they manage prisoners accordingly, rather than different variables. Especially if you're sending prisoners constantly to different prison systems rather than keeping them in one. But that's just my opinion. Do you think employment with prisoners was a useful rehabilitation tool? What happens if that is lacking? Generally less. Just bear in mind you need to make sure that it's actually connected to giving them skills. Giving them skills because a lot of prisoners have mental health related conditions. So if you need to put a brush on someone's hand and tell them to clean the floor with a mop, it's not really going to do anything to help them in terms of being outside. It's not just about letting them out. You need to give them the right jobs. For example, I did educational courses and all kinds of stuff early on my sentence. I learned bricklaying. I did carpentry type work. It's all very low work, but they gave me things to things to do, and I like creative stuff as well. Yes, and you did open a university course as well. Did you have the resources you needed? Internet access is banned in prison. No one can access the internet, and computer access is limited. You have to jump through barriers to access printing and so on. It's a bit difficult, but the way I did it, they sent in the textbooks and I read them. I posted the handwritten assessments to the assessor. How did you view this current government's handling of the prison system? It seems like overcrowding has gotten even worse over the past few years. Do you have any faith that they'll get to grips with the issue that the prison system faces? This current government is right-wing. I don't think it's possible to achieve anything progressive with this current government. Hopefully there will be improvements if Labour are elected, but to what extent those improvements will happen impact, I'm not sure. I really think that the solution, if you want to change prison systems, is to take politics out of prisoners and reintroduce a legal accountability framework. With those two things, it doesn't matter whether they go right wing, left wing, or whatever route they want to go. If you want to have two things in place, it will be led by proven modules, criminology models that are proven in many countries that are successful. And if things go wrong, that's a way of stopping the abuse of power. Question is from JM. I don't know if Labour will have a prison reform high up on their priority list. It doesn't look too likely at the moment, but do you think that clearing the courts with backlog would improve the system? There seems to be thousands of people who actually haven't been sentenced yet, while others haven't served their sentence but remain behind bars. His response is, this is an absolute injustice. The court system is barely functioning. I saw that when I was self-represented. So the two issues are very much interrelative. He says, sadly, you're rare among former prisoners that you've gone on to lead quite a successful career running a charity and becoming an author. Are you still in touch with people you met in prison and people in the sector? Is there a danger of many people slipping back into crime? His response is, I got support through the Prisoners Trust on release, probation in England, parole and probation. Services take very much on the monitoring and surveillance side, but not so much on the positive side in terms of, hey, we've got this opportunity. I'll give you an example. I was invited to the Council of Europe to attend a journalism course. It was all approved by the council's board. I was of excellent behaviour, and that wasn't supported. The probation officer would say, this prisoner will go off and do X, Y, and Z criminal things. Despite being an open prison, even though custodial behaviour was pretty good, they only look at us as if something went wrong and it would come back to us. They were not willing to take a chance on the 1% of something going wrong. They weren't thinking in terms of economics or rehabilitation after. To be fair to them, probation officers are under a lot of pressure, caseloads are huge, and they don't get a lot of support themselves. Generally, people don't want to go back to prisons, but sometimes it seems like the only option they can go. There are not many opportunities when you get released, but you can either start your own enterprise or do something like construction. But staying in the same area, you meet the same people who offer good money for crime. Just Time by Stephen Jackley is out now and it's published by Arcbound. And I will put, as I said, guys, I'll put a link in the description for you guys. So that was an interesting take from Stephen Jackley, former prisoner officer. Very fascinating for him, the story there I found. Our prison system, I've talked about prison systems a few times, but it's so important, guys. I know I'm over the time, but it's so important that they are treated as human beings. Yes, they need to pay for, obviously, for the actions and the crimes that they've committed, but obviously and serve the time. But they're still human beings, and if you treat them right, they can end up becoming a fundamental part of society once again. And just throwing them under a brick and locking away the key sometimes isn't always the right answer. And the fact that he had to fight really hard, I don't see this. Bring back books, give them the education they need when they're in prison. Teach them the right things. A lot of what Jackley said, and I've never set foot in a prison. I've never set foot in a prison cell. I've never even spoken to the prison system. My knowledge is based on from people that I've from maybe one or two people that I've known that I may or may not know, and from my knowledge here on the internet. But what I will say is that there does need to be some kind of prison reforms, that is for sure. And I've spoken a few bits and bobs in there, as I said. But what do you guys think? What do you guys think of the prison system? What do you guys think of some of my ideas on them? What do you guys think on some of the other stories that we've covered today, guys? Thank you very much for watching. If you've watched all the way, I greatly appreciate it. If you can, hit the like button, share this across social media, and if you haven't hit the bell notification icon, make sure you do, so you'll be notified of when my next videos come up. Thank you for watching another episode of Newsround. Take care, have a great weekend, and I will hope to catch you all very, very soon.